everyone, Sabrina here, and today we're going to look at ideology and Marxism and Zizekism and starting to look at Althusser. The second video in this series is going to be looking at just Althusser because I think he's a really good foundation to start looking at different ideologies from. But Marxism is very important and it came before Althusser, so we're going to look at that. I did actually film the Althusser video before, but I realised I missed some things and that this should probably come before that one, so watch this one first and then the second one. Okay, so now we're going to start. So first things first, what is an ideology? Well, an ideology is a system of ideas. It's a way of thinking. Now, you might have an ideology that can be like a belief system, a system of values. Okay, so if you've been exposed to religion, that might be a certain ideology. A collection of ideas that is shared by a few people. So for example, the Catholic Church has that specific ideology. Same with any kind of religion, but it also works for different things as well that aren't to do with religion. It's just the easiest example basically. But so it's a way of thinking, but it's usually a big kind of setting. It's not like tiny specific things. So it's not like if you have an opinion about refugees that is this, you're in this ideology. It has to do, like, it's a big encompassing thing. So Marxism, if you're an anarchist, that's an ideology as well. Zizekism, that's an ideology as well. There's lots of different ones, but I'm gonna start by showing you one because an example that I'm going to be detailing is probably going to be more useful to you than just me rattling off stuff. So ideological structures, or structures that try and convince you to believe their certain way of thinking, their kind of ideas, they appear natural and logical, and they function best when you don't notice them. So a lot of the times we don't really notice that we're being conditioned to think a certain way from the ideologies. So if you're thinking about it like that, like someone's trying to manipulate you, it's gonna work better if you don't realize that it's happening. If you do realize, then you can kind of resist it more. So the structures of ideology work through values, conceptions of the world, and symbolic systems. They legitimize either the existing social order or something in particular. So usually they are structured so the dominant group in power can retain power with a minimum amount of conflict, because we've been brought up to think a certain way about the power structures, like that this is bad and this is good. When you're looking at a text, you can see how it has that kind of effective ideology. You can look at it and see how it preserves the dominant powers that be. So for example, when you're looking at super old texts, a lot of them are like praising the Lord and stuff, because that was because the church and those people were in power, particularly in England. So a lot of poems, all things bright and beautiful, that was kind of all that kind of time was around God being the be-all end-all, and you have to listen to what God says, and that is the ultimate power structure. Was the church kind of ruled a lot of that, and the queen and king were chosen by God, so that kind of system all worked with God, and so you can't question it because it's all God's will. So you can't question anything like the power structures or anything like that, and that's a certain ideology, and that's definitely conditioning people to think a certain way and not cause any fuss about the power structures and the poverty and stuff like that. So that's if you look at those ones, and we'll go through an example in a different video because I want to do like specific poems and specific things like that to look at Marxist theory. In this system where religion is the kind of rule and capitalism rules as well, and it rules in such a way that it can't be questioned because it's all God's will, and because that's just the way it is, and if you work really hard then you might be able to move up a class, but in the end, it didn't really work like that. Like, no matter how hard you worked, if you were in poverty, you were going to stay in poverty for the rest of your life. And this is the time that Marx was around. And so he decided to develop some new ideas. So now we come to Karl Marx. Karl Marx was a philosopher, economist, socialist, journalist, and very, very much a revolutionary. He was born in 1818 in Germany. Now, he was born in a time when capitalism was the main ideology, the main theory, the main group of ideas that was going around at the time. And he came up with a theory. He came up with a theory that consisted of the economic base and the superstructure. So the base is the relations of production, the means of production. So the things you need to produce things like factories, machinery, land, materials, machines, and they were all owned by the bourgeoisie. And the proletariat, which is the working class, were exploited by the bourgeoisie. They were the relations of the production. They were the ones who were actually doing the work. And so this is the base. And then he said that there was a superstructure that maintains and legitimizes the base, and that comes from education, family, religion, mass media, and politics. And he said that these things all work together to legitimize the system and legitimize the way that things are run. So legitimize and stabilize the structure that was in place. So that means like people were taught that this is the way that God wanted it through religion, that education taught you that if you work hard then you'll be rewarded, and it's all about the individual. And that was the same with family, and politics obviously didn't try to break down the economic superstructure. A famous quote by Karl Marx was, "They do not know it, but they're doing it." And this is really important because it's really, really important to know this, because this is a base of his stuff. He says the people don't know that this system is happening, that this perpetual cycle of supporting the base and this base that is corrupt and exploits the proletariat. They don't know that that's happening, but they're doing it anyway, and they're contributing to it because that's what they've been taught, and they're just going along with what they've been taught, and they're not challenging the system, and they're just going along, and then the future generations are going to go along as well because that's what they've been taught through the education system and through the church and through all of those things. Yep, so it's just going along and going along and going along. They don't know that they're doing it, but they're doing it. So Marx wanted to change that to socialism, but we're going to talk about that more in a different video because that's a whole completely different thing. But we'll just go for now that he didn't like capitalism. So that's Marx. Now, Zizek, he came from a different approach. He says they know very well what they are doing, but they're still doing it. He said, yes, this base and superstructure exists, and the proletariat are being manipulated and stuff, but instead of saying they don't know what they're doing, they're just going along with it, he says, no, they recognize that this is happening. They recognize that there is this system of corruption and this system of reinforcing all this, but they do it anyway. They keep going and they don't really do anything to challenge it. So Zizek opposed Marx in this way. He still didn't like capitalism, that kind of stuff, but he was like, they know that they're doing it. Society recognizes that, yeah, there's this system and it's being perpetuated and all these myths are being perpetuated that this is the right thing to do and blah, 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 blah. And we're saying we have the power to change it, but we don't. We don't do anything. We just go along with the system because that's what we've been taught to do. And even though we recognize that that is a system, we still go along with it anyway. He's saying that we walk past homeless people on the street, we walk past poverty, and we make up these justifications inside our heads about why this stuff is happening, but we know very well what's happening. We know that this is a system that perpetuates this same system of corruption, and it could be way better, but we still keep on doing it. So that was Zizek, whereas Marx is they don't know what they're doing, and they're doing it anyway. because that's all they've been taught to think, and they don't know how to criticize it. Zizek says they know very well what's happening, but they just don't do anything about it. Okay? So that's the start of that. Now, Althusser is the next topic, and that looks at, he comes from after Marx, but his work is very based on Marxism and Marxist thought, and his stuff was about how we are actually perpetually being indoctrinated and being conditioned to think a certain way and to keep up the capitalist regime through the different ideological state apparatuses and the repressive state apparatus. But that's going to be in my next video. So I'll link it down below, but please check it out because it's really helpful for when you're looking at ideology and how the subject and how the person today, even you can even look at yourself and say, how have I been influenced by all these things to just not challenge the system? Have you noticed that this system is happening and you know that if everyone did something about it, it could change, but you haven't done anything anyway? This is just Zizek's thoughts. I'm not saying to go out and start a revolution, but that's how we interpret his work. Okay, so if any questions at all, feel free to message me or comment below and I will read them and respond as soon as I can. Thank you. Bye.